Yo, what is up? It's Tom. Thank you for clicking on this video. We are going to go through my updated prospect list for the start of June. The channel members will recognize this format over on my membership program. The first Monday of every month, I had been doing a prospect list update, but I've shut that down. So now, not everything is going to move over to the main channel here, but this is one feature that I really enjoyed doing and will keep up on the main channel here. So let's get right into it. As you see, I have my top 10 up, just updated. So the ranking is on the far left, and then the last and the difference. So where were they last month and how much has changed from month to month on my list is shown. As you can see, if you haven't been a channel member, thank you for all the channel members for your support, by the way. Emmanuel Rodriguez I already had up to number 2 last month. So that was a move of him going over Brooks Lee I'd already made last month. I do think you can even entertain the idea of possibly moving him up to number 1. He is performing that well in Double-A as such a young guy, and really doing it all on every facet of the game. I'm still pretty comfortable with Jenkins 1, Rodriguez 2, but if you told me you had them flipped, I wouldn't have an issue with that. And I still really like Brooks Lee. So the top of this list, I really like. As we get going, things kind of, the tone changes a bit, but I think you would rather have it that way. We'll put it that way. Another move I want to call out that was made last month was Gabriel Gonzalez slid down my list quite a bit. I have him at 9th. But not a whole lot changing from month to month other than Luke Keaschall. I'm really impressed with the way he's played, put up big numbers in Cedar Rapids. Now he's up to Double-A, looking pretty comfortable there. Just a really complete ball player, putting together really solid at-bats. Getting healthy now. He had an arm injury that prevented him from playing in the field much, so we should be seeing him play the field quite a bit more as that arm heals up. So he was the big mover for me. That 4th spot has been kind of like a revolving door. It's been a lot moving around in that one. Nobody's really completely taken that spot. I think the top 3 are absolutely locked in, and I think there's kind of a tier of the next guys, and nobody's really taken that 4th spot and run with it quite yet this year. So editing Tom here, one thing I forgot to call out was the ages for each of these players are listed like in their baseball age. So their age 22 season, they might not actually be 22, they might still be 21. And then another thing, the one little quirk I keep forgetting to call out on my list is that one of my kind of thresholds is if you are in your age 27 season or later, I don't consider you a prospect anymore. At that point, I consider you major league depth, basically. And that is why Deshaun Kersey Jr. is not on my prospect list. He is in his age 27 season. Keep that in mind if you were looking for where Deshaun Kersey Jr. was and not finding him. That's why. To the numbers 11 through 20, and here we're seeing a lot more variation from last month. Guys highlighted in green moved up at least 3 spots. Guys highlighted in red moved down at least 3 spots. Andrew Morris and Zebby Matthews moving on up. Both those guys being promoted to Double-A. I think you could make an argument that those guys should be higher. Absolutely. But 13 and 14 is where I have them at the moment. Both of them performing very well. Ricardo Olivar also moving up a couple spots. And then Connor Prelip and Tanner Schobel kind of getting passed up in some ways, but also kind of, obviously not holding on to their spots. I'd previously had them at 14, 15 last month. And Yasser Mercedes, really good to see him performing well again. He had a tough year last year. This is a really young guy who is in the Florida Complex League, playing extremely well. Highly touted guy. I had him at 27 last month. I'm moving him up to 20. I'm really looking forward when he joins the Mighty Muscles and I get to see him on a regular basis. That's really what's going to push things over for me. For a very highly touted prospect, probably higher than this on a lot of other lists, probably going to be higher than this on a lot of other mid-season updates. But again, I'm kind of looking forward to the point where I can have eyes on him on a regular basis. But certainly felt comfortable putting him in my top 20. Moving on to numbers 21 through 30. Not a whole lot of change here. This had been a little bit more more change last month, I think. So this was a lot of guys kind of I'd moved up into their appropriate spots, like Rain Down Cone had moved up quite a bit. Rubel Cespedes had moved up quite a bit last month. But a couple guys I want to call out who slipped a little bit. Junior Severino falling from 19 to 21 just a little bit, but he's not really holding up his end of the bargain with the Saints, unfortunately. Hitting a lot of home runs, but not a lot going on there beside that. And Byron Chiriot, I just got too excited about, to be honest. I just got too excited about Byron Chiriot early on this year. Talking about getting a chance to get eyes on a guy. This was kind of the first time that I got to see him play on a regular basis every day, now that the Fort Myers games are broadcast on MILB.TV. And he was looking incredible early on for Fort Myers, and he's really slowed down since then. I'm still really intrigued by him. Again, 19 years old. I think he's got a lot more game than he's shown. Looking forward to see how he turns the corner. Moving on over to numbers 31 through 40. A lot of these guys who are moving are because there's a lot of guys who moved down or even off of my list. I kind of alluded to this early on, that there's a lot of good happening when you look up high. There's a lot of guys who kind of were under the radar, but looked like they had breakout years last year, who've been bad this year. There's no sugarcoating it. We'll talk about those guys in a sec, but that's created some opportunities for some guys to move up. Eduardo Beltre hasn't even technically played in the system yet, but he's a big signing internationally as only a 17-year-old kid. You see there Dieber de los Santos also in the mix here as well. Ross Dunn is a guy who has caught my eye from last year's draft class, a left-handed pitcher throwing well for Fort Myers. Ty Langenberg, his classmate. I think those guys might have went back-to-back in the draft. 10th and 11th round. But Langenberg out of Iowa is striking out a lot of guys, missing tons of bats in Fort Myers. Both of those guys have kind of jumped on the radar for me. Moving on down to numbers 41 through 50. That's where there's just change like crazy. When you go this deep, there's kind of always a lot of change. even though I'm updating these once a month. Even though the updates are coming once a month, there's so little differentiation between this group and like if I did numbers 51 through 60. But yeah, unfortunately this season so far, kind of the thing that stood out for me on a system-wide level is how many guys that again broke out last year and have really struggled to back it up. And you see kind of some guys moving down. Of course, Jose Salas didn't really have a great year last year, but he just continues to slide down my list. Cardenas and Winkle, a couple catchers who are not really lighting things up. Unfortunately, I've had them higher up on my list. So there was, on the flip side, there was opportunity for a lot of guys to jump into the list. That's the guys highlighted in yellow. Ty Langenberg we saw on the last slide. Cesar Lares, who's pitching really well for Fort Myers. I'm not a big believer in his stuff. You might see him higher on some other lists. I believe MLB Pipeline has him inside their top 30. But he is 20 years old. He is left-handed. He's got that going for him. The body doesn't really look like a starter's body to me, but again, he's only 20 years old. So, maybe he's got some growing to do. You never know. But just his performance alone certainly has given reason for him to be up inside the top, flirting with the top 40. Again, that's another guy where if you want to argue that he should be higher based on some of his upside and less on his kind of current repertoire, I think that's a valid argument to make. I'm just not quite there yet. Alex Isola has been kind of on and off in this range for me before, kind of in the 45 to 50 range. He's back on again. Not really lighting it up for the Saints, but doing some things well, getting on base. And he's got some power as well. Aaron Sabato, who has kind of bounced in and out of my list here too in the top 50. But he's playing well for Wichita in a short sample. He's missed some time, so it's not like he's had a full 2 months to look at. But he's doing some damage at 25 in AA. It's not like we're going to jump back on the Aaron Sabato train, the Twins' first round pick in 2020. But felt like he should be recognized on here. Poncho Ruiz, an undrafted free agent the Twins got. I've got a chance to kind of take a look at this guy a little bit more of late, and his defense in particular. I do think he's ahead of the game a little bit in Fort Myers, but he is still only 22, so it's not like he's like old for the level. But his approach is really solid, gets on base a ton. I think he's legit back there at catcher. I'm not saying he's like a Gold Glove caliber guy, but I think he's definitely going to continue to develop as a catcher. So he's the guy who's really caught my eye with the mighty muscles. And then Ariel Castro's been at the back end of my list for a while now. A guy who was a big international signing. He's doing some things for the FCL Twins, enough to sort of keep him on the radar. So that's the top 50. I'm going to call out that Simeon Woods Richardson graduated from the list. He's thrown over 50 pitches in the majors now, so he is no longer prospect eligible. So congratulations to him. I believe I had him 13th last month. Who dropped off? Jay Harry, Jorel Ortega, Ben Ross, and Miguel Angel Boadas. Kind of a range of guys there, but Ortega and Ross are kind of a little bit poster boys for kind of what I was alluding to, of guys who kind of had popped up last year and weren't big prospects or anything, but were guys like on the system recaps we were talking about on a pretty regular basis, and then have kind of tailed off this year, unfortunately. Let me know if you've got any questions. Let me know if you've got any takes on these guys, especially. I watch these guys. I look at the numbers a lot, but I'm not a pro scout or anything. So if you have differing opinions from me, don't feel like you're not welcome to share those in the comments. I love that. I love when people bring some new info to the table or call me out on some of these rankings. But hopefully this was helpful, and I really appreciate you watching. We'll talk again tomorrow.